So the nicest thing on this block is the school that's right behind me. And you'll notice that it's got a nice park. It's clearly the nicest building on the whole road. And this is a nice road, completely paved, no problem, nice sidewalks and so on. But at the same time, when you look at the quality of the private businesses around them, around that school, you're dealing with a restaurant, looks like a tire shop, and so on and so forth. So I'm actually, oh, this is interesting. Old little gas station over here. So it's significant to understand why that building is the best building on the block. And also just to understand the significance of history within this area. So when a country is colonized, it doesn't get to teach its own history in its own language. In almost every case, its educational system and the legal requirements imposed are going to be from outsiders. And that's happening at the same time that the colonial power establishes supply chains, diverting natural resources and essentially privately held land or resources outside of the country for export. And so what ends up happening is, over time, if the colonial power is unfair, mistreats the locals, and so on and so forth, and that happens in every single colonial situation that we know of, what happens is that they are eventually booted out. They are, but not necessarily their money, right? Because their money, in many cases, is what's propping up, or what was propping up a business in the area that would cater to them. And not only that, because you have to understand just the significance of being under colonization. It's not only that your central government gets, taken over. In many cases, your private businesses are now subject to laws made for the benefit of an outside country. Very obvious in Malaysia. You go down there and you'll see an entire district like the garment district. You'll see, you'll see any sort of old storefront with Chinese letters. Just take a look at them closely next time. You'll see it's on the same block. They're all involved in the same business. That was probably done to reduce competition and so on and so forth, and also to prevent perhaps price gouging. But the significance overall is that when the colonizer leaves, what ends up happening is the government that is created in place, the free government, essentially thinks only about its own priorities, most of which include education, under its own principles. And in Indonesia, that would mean the principles of Pancasila, which would include the principles of Islam as understood by Indonesians, which is different from probably most places in the world. And so you have to understand that whether it's Malaysia or Indonesia, the reason that the government is so strong is because they were so weak before. And so as a result, when they established a free government, in many cases under a religious sort of motivation, then religion, the separation of religion and state, no longer makes a lot of sense, because what's happening is the principles of education that you're trying to teach the next generation of leaders has to be part of something, I suppose, greater than yourself. Especially if you are in the business of creating all of that from scratch. And so as a result, when you look at a school, when you go to another country, and perhaps you're tempted to lament the development in that country, maybe you gotta take a look at the educational facilities and then just sort of think about what's happening in the United States right now, where you have technology companies that are trillion-dollar companies, Apple, Google, NVIDIA, and ask yourself who's really running the country in the United States, to the extent that you have corporations that are worth trillions of dollars. And so this is another perhaps lesson that I'd like to teach, which is that in the United States, what really made the Americans successful was this idea that the corporations, that the private sector would work hand in hand with the public sector. So they would encourage each other towards a certain goal, whether that's the adoption of digital technology, quite obvious from DARPA all the way to a multi-trillion-dollar corporation. You can see it all over the place, highways and so on and so forth. What you see that is holding back people in formerly colonized countries is the failure to work, I guess, hand in hand with the private corporations because of the fear of what might happen due to history, right? Due to what's happened in the past. When people have allowed the VOC to come in, or just untrammeled foreign expansion. So I guess that's sort of just my thoughts of the day.